In this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how I made this beautiful black walnut and Petoskey desk. Me and my family like to go rock hounding, and we get to collect all of these really cool rocks and fossils that are millions of years old, and then I put them as an inlay into furniture and artwork and things like that. Let's get started. All right, so first things first, I just got carpal tunnel surgery when I was building this thing. So that's why you see me walking around with a gimpy hand, okay? All right, so I like to start out by building a frame. This makes it easier for me to show my client exactly what I see. I know on YouTube and Instagram and stuff, you see people building those big fancy boxes that have the pocket holes and all of those things. You don't have to do all of that. I like to make this so that way I can show the client the end result of like, what is it going to look like? What's the layout going to be? So I, after 6 years, can look at a slab and be like, yes, that's going to work. I can see the end result, not so much on the client's part. So this allows me to show them what I see. All right, so I am making my rough cuts. And I talk about this often. It doesn't take a lot to get started in your resin business. I started my business with less than $200. It takes a lot of work though. Let me tell you that. It takes a lot of work and there is a huge learning curve. I break all these things down in my epoxy resin e-courses and workshops. Those can be found. I will link them up down below. All right, so no matter what kind of river table you're doing, you're gonna wanna remove the bark. I don't care if you are pinning it with a brad nail gun or whatever, the bark is going to come off. It's gonna create a weak spot in your river table, so you wanna get all of that off, all the way down to the wood, okay? All right, so take your wire wheel, take your drill, and clean up all of those live edges. Then you make your cuts down, and I have a lot of these little tools that I have accumulated over the years that just make work a little bit easier. But trust me, if you're just getting started, you really don't need these things. After you have your wood cut down to size, cleaned up and flattened, I then make my frame waterproof, okay? And I do this with tuck tape. A lot of people are like, what is that red tape? It is a sheathing tape. It's called tuck tape. You can use all sorts of different kinds of tapes. When I was first starting, I used duck shipping tape. I couldn't justify spending $15 on one roll of tape, so I spent $13 on, I think, 8. You're gonna add a bead of 100% silicone caulk underneath, around, and on the inside of this frame. And this is going to, you're also gonna make the seam like that. This is gonna allow for no leaks at all. This is like extra insurance and all of those things. And yes, I put the weights down, and this just allows it to have like a really, really, really good seal. So after that dries, I give it a day. I put my wood in, and then I lay down my base colors. Now, I always talk about, yes, I put a hole in my bucket. I always talk about using the right resin for the job. This is gonna be 1/4 of an inch thick. And technically, that would be a casting resin or a deep pour resin that you would have to use, but I like to actually make it have a flash cure, like an exothermic reaction, and I use a tabletop resin. I actually use Promise Epoxy's UV art resin, and this allows me to put my rocks in and stuff that evening. So I use 3 different blues, and those are from Eye Candy. You can use code FLUIDWOOD20 for 15% off. I then arrange my rocks, and then I go in with the first set of waves. So doing this, I use, again, Promise Epoxy UV art resin. This is not a deep pour resin. It's just really good for art and surface pours and things like that. So I cover all of my surfaces. Be sure to break all of the surface tension. And if you don't know what any of these things are, surface tension is where resin has not been. So it's not gonna flow where it hasn't been. I then go in with my true white pigment and Sell Magic. This is my wave kit. I created this. I sell it on my website. I think I can link it here in this video. I wasn't able to find a white pigment that made the cells and the lacing that I desired. So I took my little chemist hands and I went to work, and after about a year, I finally created it. True white. It's so magic. It is so freaking cool. It is so good. And this is what I use on all of my oceans. A lot of people are like, what do you use? I can't find anything like that. So this is what it is. All right, so after your 2 layers of waves, I go in with the deep pour. Now, this is a 2-inch thick top. They were very specific. They wanted it to be 2 inches. So I am pouring 2 inches of Promise Epoxy Deep Pour Resin. This is my go-to casting epoxy. I don't use any other resin for this job. I know that I am 100% going to get consistent results and clear pours. That is why I do not sway from their resin. All right, when it comes to castings, you'll see me use other art resins and things like that. So I like to get all of the rocks wet, and this kind of seals them up, but since it's already a deep pour, not really. It just allows the client to see, hey, look how pretty this is, and then they get super excited like I am, and yeah. All right, so I'm pouring the rest of the pour. This is not cured. The first layer is not cured at all. Like, this was probably about 19 to 20 hours in. So I'm going to let that cure up. And then I'm taking the 3 blues that I used on the bottom of the table, and I'm actually going to fill any inclusions or cracks with those. This was a really, really, really big one, though. I actually had to, when I demolded it, I actually had to fill it from the bottom as well, because it did have a little bit of a pocket underneath. So I do a little bit of an over pour because resin shrinks, and this is gonna go down a little bit. Make sure you pop all of your bubbles. And I thought I was at the 2-inch mark, but I was not, so I had to pour just a little bit more. I actually allowed that layer to cure, which means you have to scuff it up. So if you're doing a layer over a layer of resin and it cures, you have to scuff it up with 220 grit sandpaper or a scuff pad. Clean it up, and then you can go ahead and do your next pour. All right, so once that's cleaned up, we're gonna go ahead and do our last pour on here, other than the flood coat, of course. And this is so satisfying. I love watching this resin just come back to life. You got layer on layer of waves, which adds depth and dimension inside of your piece. And just seeing all of those rocks that me and my babies got to go out to the beach and find. So exciting. All right, so I waited about 4 days, and then I came back and I demolded this. And I've got my favorite tools that I have to demold this. It's this old crowbar that I got from this estate sale. All right, so take your screws out and then demold it. This is so satisfying. I love all the sounds and everything. Let me let you hear them. All right, after you got your piece demolded and separated from the bottom, you're gonna go ahead and flatten it. And this is the bit that I use. I wanted to show you guys. I did start out with like a $30, $40 bit off of Amazon. After it made sense that this is something that I really, really like doing, I went ahead and I took the plunge and I bought a bit that had these carbide knife inserts, and I have never regretted that purchase. So I'm actually taking this piece down to the end dimensions, and I'm making my final cuts. I do this with the track saw. This allows me to make straighter cuts, 90-degree corners, like everything that my client's looking for, right? Everything it takes to make a quality piece of furniture. All right, so after I make my cuts, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm looking for any small inclusions that were exposed after I flattened it. And I go in with Starbond CA glue. You can actually color this, and they have color packs available, though I didn't use them this time. I went ahead and pulled one of the blues from the ocean, and I actually added it into the CA glue, and that's how I colored in those small cracks and crevices. I didn't do all of them. The ones that are just in the wood like that, I like I like just to keep that uniform color in the grain and stuff like that, right? So they actually wanted a hole over here in the corner for their cords and their wires. So we got to make that happen. This was actually really, really thick though. So I had to take my chisel and get all of that out of there so that way I could get that piece out. And that took some doggone elbow grease and work, okay? I really like these two Wen tools. I wanted to show them to you guys because when it comes to the holes like that, or if you're making a D-handle charcuterie board or anything with a hanging hole, those two tools come in so handy, and I'm going to link them up down below, as well as with everything else I'm using. The wave kit, the resins, all of it. Everything I'm using is going to be linked up down below. And if you're looking for a custom order, that will be down below as well. So a bug actually got in my first seal coat. So I got it out with a Dremel, and then I used a UV resin to bring that back up to surface. It is such a good resin. It is from Resin Rockers. I've got the coupon code in the bottom as well as the link. And now we're getting on our flood coat. This is something that a lot of people struggle with. Flood coats are really, really easy once you know what you can and cannot do with resin. I actually have an e-course that is dedicated to how to get the perfect epoxy resin flood coats. This is crucial to me because a lot of my clients come to me because I do the clear pours and I do amazing flood coats, and those just really, really, really set a piece off. Some people want oil coats, but like hard oil finishes and stuff. But for the most part, a lot of people want flood coats from me. All right, yes, I move this piece all by myself all throughout this thing. And it was a struggle because, like I said, I had just had carpal tunnel surgery. But this is how I do it. And I thought it was a little bit comedic, so that's why I added this in there. Because your girl be struggling. Your girl be struggling. And you see Sadie ain't helping. She just looking at me. She's not helping me at all. All right, let's get the drips off of the bottom, and then we're going to go ahead and add our legs on here. I'm just measuring to make sure that they're going to be even on both sides, and I like to use threaded inserts when I do this. The reason I use threaded inserts is because this is going across the country, okay? And just with that alone, I put on and took off these legs at least 3 times, right? And they're also going to be put on again. And if they ever move or need to put this in storage or anything like that, they're going to be taken off again. So if you're just screwing in and out of a tabletop, that's going to make it so weak. So we don't want that to happen. Use threaded inserts. Just trust me, if you spend the amount of time that I did on a piece like this, you're going to want to do that. All right, this is the final piece. Thank you guys so much for watching. Do you like this? Would you put something like this in your house? And have you ever made something like this? As always, if you have any questions, drop them down in the comments. If you want to learn resin, check out my e-courses, like and subscribe to see more content just like this.